Hello and welcome back to Normal Guy Games. Today I'm going to be painting the Farstalker Kinband from Kill Team. Now this was these came from the Into the Dark box, I believe, which was the first Gallo Dark box from Kill Team. I really like the look of the Kroot, and I kind of like the lore around them as well. So I was actually quite excited to put him together and paint him up. So in this particular instance, what I used was just a contrast style. I didn't use slap chop this time. I just used a Wraithbone primer and a light dusting of gray sear from above the models, and from there I just use contrast paints to put down the base coats and the highlights, and then I went back with a couple other paints as well. So let me pull up the footage and we'll have a look at it. So this is what they look like before we start. Now keep in mind I used Wraithbone, and you can't really tell, but I did spray a little bit of gray sear from the top. Now for this first model, what I was using was Gargax Sewer to do the little quills that are on their head, and I also used just a little bit of Gorgrunta fur to kind of blend together. Now as you can see, the first one there that I painted, the Heavy Gunner, and the first dog that I painted, the Kroot Hound, both of those are just Gargax Sewer, but I decided as I was working on the next one that I kind of wanted to blend things out. So what I started doing was I used Creed camo on the upper parts of the legs and the torso, and I used the Eldari Emerald contrast paint on the bottoms of the feet. And to me, it makes them look like they may have gotten into something Eldar in nature, you know, something like that, or maybe even something Necron. Because if I remember correctly, and I'm sure somebody can stop me if I'm wrong, the Kroot sort of reproduce by eating things and then vomiting up an offspring, I believe is how it works. Forgive me for not being I'm not up to date on my lore. I really need to get into the lore and read more of the books, to be honest. I just have to find time. So what I'm doing on all of the leather bits and the armor is I'm actually using a combination of Gargax Sewer, Gorgrunta fur, snakebite leather, and wildwood. And I'm doing this, alternating this just to make things interesting. I kind of wanted to split things up because honestly, if you make everything look one color, if you make everything look snakebite or everything look, wildwood, it just doesn't mesh well. And for these guys, I feel like, especially since some of their cloaks are patchwork, it looks a lot better to kind of spread things out and to make things look a little bit different here and there. Now for the metallic bits, I used just regular lead belcher. I was trying to finish off my pot of lead belcher, and luckily for me, I have finally finished off that old pot that I bought years ago. So now I'm gonna move on to some different paints here, probably the Vallejo model color, or not model color, but the duraluminum ones, the aluminium, duraluminum, dark aluminium, the airbrush paints. That's probably what I'm going to start using for a little while, because I got a couple of jars of those. And I do have some Army Painter metals, but I don't know, I haven't been too keen on Army Painter lately. It just doesn't really go down onto a model the way I want it to. So anyway, all of the weapons I did in black, and I used Black Templar for those. And like I said, with all of the leather pieces, I just kind of decided to blend a couple of colors together and or use the different panels to put different browns down. And this honestly, I think it turned out pretty good. And with their skin being green and me using that lighter, almost jade-like color, I think it brings enough color to the model to not make them look too boring, too strange. And in hindsight, I probably could have found a way to implement maybe a red or a blue or something like that. It does have a lot of cool and warm colors, but I feel like maybe I should have tried to break it up a little bit, maybe with a little bit of red or something like that, something a little bit different. So as you can see here, this guy. I'm just using him as a primary example for what most of my crew will look like, because he has just about everything that I will be using. And the face mask, I alternated between the leather ones being, of course, a leather color of some sort of brown, and the other masks I used basilicanum gray to make them look not metallic, but maybe a synthetic material like a mesh or a neoprene, maybe something like that. And in the end, I kind of do like the choice of that basilicanum. Now the claws, as you can see here, I used Balathean chitin, which is kind of my go-to bone color, and that's a Reaper color. It's not a Citadel color. To me, it's very fluid, it's very smooth, and I don't ever have to thin it down much because it actually comes out pretty thin from the start. So everything sort of works out there. Now for the eyes, I used Dungeon Slime from Reaper. It's a very glowy, sort of a greenish yellow color. And of course, as always, I do not like doing eyes. They actually, I don't know, eyes never turn out well for me. Now for the bases, what I'm using on the bases here, I'm using Astrogranite Debris. And to tell you the truth, I kind of wish that I had laid down like a gray color or maybe a black before I started putting it down, because I did have to go back on a couple of places, and I usually will paint the base a sort of a darker or a unifying color before I start laying the texture paste down, just in case there are a couple of areas where the texture paste doesn't cover, because that does happen from time to time. Sometimes the texture paste will not cover properly. Now, once I was done with all of that, I did go back, and of course, if you're doing contrast or slap chop or anything like that, you don't have to stop at just the basics of it. And I know I've said this many, many times, but you can go back and do some extras. Like right here, what I'm doing is I'm taking a little bit of Mournfang to that Wildwood contrast, just to make a couple of areas stand out a little bit more. So that as you can see, the stitching on this leather is a lighter color than the rest of the leather itself, and that kind of makes things pop a little bit. So that's what I did for a lot of the leather pieces. I went back with Mournfang or with Scrag Brown. This is actually Scrag Brown, and I'm going back over just a smaller area just to make that Scrag Brown show up just near the center of the stitching in a couple of places. And that's what I did for a lot of the leathers and a lot of the different areas that have those excess pieces that kind of stick out. As Guy from Midwinter Minis would say, the sticky out bits. So the weaponry, I also went back on the weaponry in some of the areas, and I used a little bit of lead belcher to brighten up a couple of areas and make them look warm and worn and whatnot. And as you can see here, this is me using that Scrag Brown to sort of put some texture and a couple of different areas of varying damage on some of these. Now I did go back with a little bit of Balathean chitin, and I did try and make them just a little bit lighter for the stitches on these guys. And I also went back and I did a couple more of the claws because I had missed a few of the models. And that's what, and that kind of make it stand out just a little bit more to have that white color as a sort of dot right there in the center. And I was just, all I was trying to do here was just trying to differentiate the colors just a hair. Now, this is what I was talking about. As you can see, I just picked a couple of different places to add a little bit of a metallic highlight. And what that is just kind of wear and damage, and those raised areas that would be caught on, a corner, or, would be rubbed against something, and some of the paint would come off. And that's what you're trying to simulate with those little areas like that. Now, for the quills that are on their arms and legs and or any other areas, I went back with Mournfang, and I did a very small highlight of Mournfang on there. Now, as you can see, what I'm doing for the metallic areas and some of the other areas, I'm actually using a black wash I used a black wash there. And then on the main bodies, I went back with Athonian Camo Shade, and this was just to add a little bit of depth to the skin. So what I'm doing here, once again, this is just a couple of areas where I missed the claws on this particular model. I did miss a couple of them. I got kind of ahead of myself in a couple of places, and I started jumping because I was excited. So what I did here is, obviously, as you can see, just a black wash over top of the astrogranite debris, and then I did a light dry brush of a lighter gray. And this is the final product. I really like the bow on this guy. I really, really like the bow. I know I said it already, but that's kind of my favorite weapon out of all of these. Anyway, as you can see, they actually turned out pretty good. And this is, once again, it's all contrast with a little bit of here and there changes and highlights with other colors. And this is the thing that I always stress. This is the thing that I say a lot. Just because you're using contrast, just because you're using slap chop, doesn't mean you have to stop there. You can keep going. You can push the highlights. You can push the details. You can put more colors down. And adding those extra few colors, adding those extra few details really does make a difference on these models. So, I could have just put, the black on the weapons and not worried about it, but I ended up putting some metallic scratches here and there. I ended up putting the blue glow on some of them. I ended up putting the green and the basilicanum on the bow to work things out. On the goggles there, I used a blue color, so like I said, anyway, push the highlights. Anyway, please like and subscribe, and thank you for watching.